Thank you. Today's October 30th, 2024. Welcome to the Warrant Committee. As you see from the posted agenda, we have several guests here tonight to speak to us regarding some budgetary plans for the school department in the town. I just wanted to very briefly address some future business. We had our Monday meeting with Nick Milano regarding budget override discussion. And what I do is, as I indicated in the earlier weeks, I'm looking to get a couple of more of our boards and committees in here, just talk about some of the projects that they're working on throughout the town, just get an idea of future plans. That would be through the planning board and some of the other committees that are working on some building projects in town, just to hear from them and just get their perspective, what they're going to be looking to do in the future, or especially at town meeting. So. Please just keep an eye on your emails. I don't have a planned schedule for next week at this time. I still need to touch base with a few other members of some committees in town, check on their availability. We will still be in the Cronin room until the town clerk is done with Blute downstairs. So we only have to do this a few more times, and we'll go back to our regular spot, the little bone room. So the only thing is, I ask you again, just to reiterate, if you could just keep an eye on email. Feel free, obviously, to reach out to me if you have any questions, or there's an issue with attendance in the meeting after it's set. So that's really all I have in terms of future business. I'm going to try to keep things moving, get people in front of us, and get the information flowing. In anticipation of a potential, well, most likely a town meeting in February, and then our annual in May. So. That's really it for future business at this time. So now I would like to introduce the keynote speakers for this evening. We're very fortunate, Warrant Committee. Oh, that's right. We should probably do attendance. Thank you, Karen. No, that's a good thing. I got a little excited and ahead of myself. So we do have a quorum present. I've counted, but if we could just run through the attendance.
Julia Maxwell, Brian McGuire, Amanda Gassi, and Judy Steele is on Zoom.
That's okay. Thank you.
Elizabeth Dillon.
Thank you.
Present.
I am here. Thank you.
Thank you. So let me step back. Sorry about that. We have our guest tonight from the school department. We have our superintendent, Dr. Peter Burrows. We have Dr. Lizzie Carroll, the chair of our school committee. We have Mr. Mark Loring, also a member of the school committee and the finance committee. And we have Ms. Katie Blake, our new assistant superintendent for business at Milton Public Schools. Katie is new, doing the finance of the school, so we're really excited to meet her and see what she's been working on thus far with the rest of the team. So, all that being said, the microphone is yours, schools. Thank you so much.
So, thank you, Tom, for the invitation to join you. We're really happy to be here tonight, and I want to thank all of you. It's nice to have just gotten to meet each of you, see those that I haven't seen in a while. Thank you for serving on the Warrant Committee. I know we participate in a lot of meetings, and you all might have even more meetings than we have, so just appreciate you volunteering your time for this process. And I just want to sort of start off. We're going to each speak a little bit, and our vision for the time was, and why I appreciate the invitation so much. I don't think since I've been on school committee, at least this is my 4th year, I don't think we've ever come this early in the year. And I don't think we've honestly ever had the opportunity to just sort of introduce ourselves as a team and share with you sort of the current work of the district, which should then in turn drive our budget requests. And so we're excited for this opportunity this evening to, as I see it, just build the strong foundation for a collaborative partnership over this year. As we will get into sort of the nitty-gritty of the budget requests. And I think it's, I hope, going to be helpful for you to have much more context for the work of the district than you have had in past years. We've definitely appreciated members, Lori certainly, others who have joined our finance sub, Allison, you're there too, who have been joining our finance subcommittee meetings, which are also always cross-posted as full school committee meetings. And if you've been following along there, some of what you'll hear tonight might be a little bit repetitive, but it's a great opportunity, I think, to create like a common baseline for the full warrant committee, and we're really grateful for the opportunity. One thing I just want to share with you all from the school committee perspective is, something that we have been doing a lot of our own internal work on since Peter joined last year, is to gain clarity around like our role as school committee members, the finance subcommittee's role, the full school committee's role. And so I think something that has, I will say, been quite productive for us. I think it has really helped us with our communication, helped us work well together, to be efficient, and, to allow everybody to be kind of fulfilling their role. And so I think part of what I'm really excited for this year with the warrant committee is like figuring out together what that actually looks like and working well with the school. I know you've already kind of identified your schools committee. I think I will say, through nobody's fault, but the past couple of years, I think, we've gone a little bit like one step at a time without much forward planning for the process. So that's one of the things that we want to share tonight and get your input on. And just to name, if you aren't actively involved in Milton Public Schools right now, as a family of an MPS student, it is really exciting that we're at a moment of like a fresh start and a new approach with Milton Public Schools. So obviously Dr. Rose started last year. Katie has just joined us this year. And the work that they're going to be presenting tonight, which you hopefully had the opportunity to preview, is an approach to planning forward that I don't think we've been seeing in quite this way. And so I hope you'll agree that it represents like some good new clarity and intentionality around our planning, which I hope you can expect will then flow into the budget process as well. So we're here to introduce our team. I'm Lizzie. I'm the chair of the school committee. This is my second year. I was elected to my second term on school committee last spring. I have two kids in 5th and 2nd grade at Tucker School. That's kind of my angle on Milton Public Schools as a parent. And that's me. I'm going to hand it to Peter next. And what Peter is going to share with you is really the two documents that you had received: the implementation plan, which is a 5-year plan that was produced, and he'll explain sort of the process that led to the creation of that plan, as well as the action plan for year 1, which is right this year now. Each year there will be an action plan that details out sort of the steps that are being taken to achieve the priorities laid out in the implementation plan. He is going to share that. Mark and Katie are going to go into some more specifics of the work that's being done to kind of set the table for our budget development for FY26. We're aiming to kind of share these things relatively briefly with you, and then take whatever questions and input you have on what's been shared to make sure that you're really solid in your understanding of it. To the extent you have more particular questions pertaining to like what you can expect in the FY26 budget process, another real advantage of having this opportunity is that we're able to gather those questions. We are just starting the FY26 budget development process. It's still October, so we're not ready to present you yet with the content of the budget proposal, but we would like to be able to address your questions in a proactive manner. So we will kind of gather questions tonight that we're not prepared to answer yet, but be sure then we're able to respond to those through the process that Katie will lay out, which explains sort of what we're hoping for as a cadence for meeting and collaborating going forward. And we can take your input on that, certainly. So thank you again for the opportunity, and I'll hand it over to you, Peter.
Right. All right, well, good evening.
Good evening.
Good to see you all. Yeah, so as Lizzie mentioned, we're really going into FY26 and into this budget development in a really different place than we were last year. The process that Lizzie referenced in terms of getting to the two documents, the implementation plan and the action plan, was a year and a half of inquiry, listening, collaborating with MPS staff, MPS leadership, the community, to really kind of understand who are we and what do we want to become. One of the first things I noticed in coming to Milton was there were a lot of great ideas around where we needed to go, what we needed to do, but very little organization around how we're going to get there. And so it's been really important in this role for me to, essentially try to bring the community together and help build a shared understanding across Milton of both where we are and what kinds of things do we need to shift and change to get to where we want to be. If you had last year in the spring, the culmination of all of that research and analysis went into a priority report, which is fairly long. It's about 50 pages, I think, and it's both all the listening and learning I did, and it's an analysis of our key systems that really kind of set the stage for the two documents that you see in front of you. So that would be also, I think, a really helpful document to review if you haven't already done that. It includes a lot of stakeholder input. I don't think any of that will be a surprise to you. You'll see that our community is aligned on some things and not necessarily aligned on others. We really like this, we don't really like this. So there are places in the priority report where I've just kind of put all that on the table and said, here's who we are.
And we'll send that. We can send you that too, in case you're up for that additional background.
Ideally, we want our budget process to be as inclusive as possible. We want it to be as transparent as possible, and I think, as Lizzie mentioned, our intention in coming right now, before we traditionally have come in front of the Warrant Committee, is to kind of build that collaboration, teamwork, and shared understanding, which I think will only benefit the process and the outcome. In my experience in school districts, it's very easy for a school district budget to kind of roll over year to year without a lot of intentionality, and Lizzie mentioned that word, and that really reverberated in my brain when I heard it, because I think that's definitely a goal in FY26 and beyond, is to bring that kind of intentionality to funding our vision, as opposed to looking at our budget and adding things to our budget without really looking at to what end. So we're in the process. I think over the course of this year, as you look through the action plan, you can see that by the end of this year, we'll be well on our way, and a lot of the systems development that we've identified needs to happen. We're not going to completely be there by the end of this year, so I think as we look at FY26, one of the things we're thinking about and looking at in terms of staffing and programming, et cetera, is how far we have to make a prediction right now to look at. We're going to do we have action teams that are working on these action plans, so you can see in there who is on each action team. We have to kind of predict, okay, we think the work is going to be this far by June, it might be this far by next October. That's going to mean X, Y, and Z in terms of FTE, that's staffing allocation, or in terms of a program which might need a certain kind of resource. So that is conversation we're having right now with our full leadership team, that obviously we're having at the central office as we look at this budget, to not go too fast, but not go too slow. So there's like a kind of a perfect spot where we're starting to shift and move things, but we're not taking where we are and just kind of like shaking a bag full of of kind of things and just dumping it on the table and being like, okay, here we are. So we're trying to do that process as thoughtfully as possible. I'm really excited about working with Katie, who is bringing a lot of really strong experience to budget development. I think some of you have already seen what she is bringing to this process, and I'm going to hand it off to her now to share a little bit about process and what you can expect in terms of kind of how we're thinking about the different segments of the next months.
So, hi everyone, it's so nice to meet you all, and thank you for giving us this opportunity to not only meet you, but to talk about the budget process, and just all of the values that we have at Milton Public Schools and kind of the financial implications that go around or that help to support all of our programs and our initiatives. One of the first pieces of work that we really focused on as a finance subcommittee and internally within the school department was just outlining the timeline and the expectations of the budget development process. And a large piece of budget development and the work that goes around finance and operations was built into the implementation plan and the action plan. And so I think that truly reflects that there is great value in making sure that finances and that the budget and that the school department and all of our stakeholders are engaged in the process of being fiscally responsible. And so one of the first pieces, as I referred to, that we had worked on was the budget calendar. And so we shared a copy of the budget calendar, and I can certainly reshare that if any of you don't have a copy. But I'm just going to talk a little bit about kind of like the process that we work on internally within the school department as outlined in the budget calendar. I won't go through each step because you can all take some time and read through it, but I just wanted to talk about it at a high level. And then we also did share one of the other items that we've worked on that we've started to share out and just be able to review together during the finance subcommittee with the full school committee is just a budget frequently asked questions document, and so that was shared with you all. I think the budget frequently asked question document for me is just a reflection of things that are truly really important that we want everyone to understand. And so if there are any recommendations or questions that may be missing from that document, I'm more than happy to add them. I'd love to be able to share that information with anyone, whether it be families, community members. So we will post that on the website at some point in the near future. But just wanted to share that with you all in the hopes that it provides some value. And then, of course, just looking for your feedback. So when we look at the budget calendar and kind of the process that we go through in the school department, I have it structured kind of in seasons. And so in starting and looking at the summer is an interesting time in the school department because although our teachers take that opportunity for some downtime, that's a really busy time in the business office. So this summer, we're essentially living in 3 fiscal years. We're closing the previous fiscal year, we're opening the current fiscal year, and we're preparing to start budgeting or creating a new fiscal year. And so that's a really busy time for us. And so as we close the books and we open the books for the current fiscal year, we're receiving some really important information around grant funding and some of the outside revenues that we're going to receive in the school department that are going to help to offset some of the expenses that we incur just on a daily basis. We also have an administrative retreat, and for me that was, just being new to the district and new to the community, it was a really important time to be able to talk about the budget and communicate with my fellow co-workers and administrators kind of what what we look for in budget guidelines and budget development, and how to kind of look at how we are servicing our students, and kind of the structures that we have in place, and what and how our expenses, should be reflected in the budget. And so that those administrative retreats in the summer, I look at kind of as our budget kickoff to get us to really start thinking about it. Over the fall, as we are in the process of administering the current year budget, we have a number of meetings just to make sure that all of the principals and kind of our directors know what their budget is, what the expectation is for spending, that we're spending within the budget, and just to also get their feedback to make sure, is this budget appropriate, and what are we seeing, what changes do we need to make? And then based off of that information, we truly try to make sure that as we look to building the new budget, that those changes are incorporated in that documentation. It also gives us an opportunity to engage stakeholders, whether that be our families, community members, being able to engage the school committee, finance subcommittee, being able to meet you all tonight, and just start our budget conversations. So we're really trying hard to do a lot of that work now, and then in also engaging, of course, internally, different areas or different members of the school department too, and having budget meetings. And then we will, in the next couple of weeks, prepare that budget document, and then we'll have our initial presentation, and then we just hope to be able to share that information. We want to make sure that our documentation is transparent. We want to make sure that it's easy to read, and that it is available, so that if there's someone from the community that really wants to have some insight on, what is the school department spending in different areas, we want to make sure that that's just readily available to folks.
One of the things I'll just add too is we also have a real, obviously, strong connection with administration in this building too. So we are working frequently with Nick, Amy, Joanna, the full team here. We see that as a real integral place where we have so much, that really is our team. It's not, the schools are not separate from the town. We are one. So that is something that, as Katie's gotten on board, we've been spending a lot of time here in this room. In this room meeting and talking about projections and what we can expect and where things are landing. And again, like similar to working together here, working with Nick and his team has been important and definitely meaningful.
Okay.
So the final piece for us right now is, last but not least, our colleague Mark. So many of you know Mark. He is the chair of our finance subcommittee. Also on the finance with Mark is Dr. Selena Miranda, who is also serving as the vice chair for the school committee, as well as Amanda Serio, former warrant committee member. And so, Mark, what do you want to add to kind of what we've shared so far? And then we'll just open it up to your questions.
Yeah, stinks to go last in this group, but they said it all very well. But again, I think just to echo again, we're excited about the process. I was on finance committee last year, not leading it. This is my first year. Unfortunately for Peter and Katie leading it, they got to deal with me. And again, I think intentionality is you've heard from all of us, and so we're excited to be more intentional about the process, again, with warrant committee, with select board, with each other, just to make sure that we're doing everything we can to, again, be intentional about the requests we're making to the town for resources for our students, and ensuring that those are the right resources that will take our kids kind of and provide them the school district that they deserve. And so we really, care deeply about making a space and making a school district that is worthy of our students. And so, again, we're all fairly new within each of our positions, and so just excited for the energy that everybody's provided, especially Peter and Katie and all the work they're doing. So I was charged with kind of taking notes, so as y'all ask questions.
You volunteered to take
Voluntold might have been the same, but no. So obviously we're not presenting the budget here, but I'm sure there are lots of questions you have that will help guide kind of the presentation that ultimately we do make in the budget. And so anything you have here on that today, again, we'll take down, will be very helpful. If you think of something later on, again, I think you hopefully have all of our emails, or certainly Tom can share them with you. Email us, reach out. We're excited for kind of the ongoing dialogue.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the comments, the materials that you've shared, and I think I said to Dr. Burrows before they even started, just kind of putting us in your shoes, and just seeing the steps you're taking towards, what will be, the presentation in terms of the budget and the funding. So thank you very much. I'd open the floor up to any member. Steve?
So first of all, Katie, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm super excited that you're really into the data like this and you're doing the planning. It's exciting, actually. It's one of my favorite parts of what I do professionally as well. So I want to thank you for that. For me, when we started the Warrant Committee this year, one of the goals I had was for us to build more collaboration between the folks that we're working with, like yourselves, are key, right? The biggest part of our budget. So us meeting this really, for me personally, I think for the other members, is super exciting. It's great for us to get in and be more collaborative with you and ask more questions around why you're shaping the budget the way you are, so that we can make more informed recommendations as we see as well, right? So I think that's really cool. I'm excited about the budget calendar, getting into that. It sounds super nerdy, but I'm excited about that.
It's okay.
And then, for me to understand, because in my work, I work with a lot of construction, and to understand seasonality and understanding your seasonality for your budgets is critical for me. To understand that summer is busy for you. I would think there's a lot of construction going on in your schools. Kids are out, you can build, but the planning goes on. So I'm really excited to work with you all on that. So thank you, and Lizzie, great to see you again. Last time I saw you, I think it was in softball, so great to see you. Great to see you all. Thank you.
Come on.
So you mentioned how it's easy for the school districts to roll over year to year on the budget. That's correct. I wanted to ask, you mentioned about disagreements with areas where you're going to allocate everything, and how often that might conflict, especially with, say, new projects, like, say, new classrooms.
I think our goal through the budget process is to, I'm not sure if I need that.
Actually, if you could, thank you.
Our intention through the budget process is to in whatever areas we do find that kind of tension or friction, that we look at it, we talk about it, and we resolve it. That doesn't mean when you look at a budget in any year that every member of our community agrees 100% with every single line item on that budget. So I think we accept that we're going to do our best to hear every voice in the community and put together a budget that reflects our shared beliefs about education, about what we want our students to have. So that's definitely our goal through this process, is to allow enough of a window into our budget and our process so that the community can make informed decisions and can feel a part of the budget. In terms of year to year, as we develop the implementation plan and we put these systems in place, part of that process internally with MPS staff particularly is collaborating and working through, we could go in this direction or this direction, and maybe some people think this direction's better and some think this. And we are creating processes to have those conversations so that we're, again, as many people as possible are part of the decision making. At some point we have to move forward, right? We have to make a decision and take a strong step forward for students. And so we're, I think in my experience, the more we can listen, understand, and have a very clear process with a timeline so that we don't get stuck just talking about things and not moving. And that's another issue in a lot of organizations and in public organizations too, is there's a lot of talk and sometimes there's not a lot of action. So we're clear that we need to have the conversation and engage, and we also need to move as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi. On that note, the transparency note, and knowing that this town is likely moving towards the debt override exclusion for a new school, is there any plan to record the finance subcommittee meetings and make those available to the town? I know this committee has talked a lot about feeling like, you know, the town needs to be educated about what that means, and I think transparency in how the budget is being formed and those decisions are being made is huge to like bringing the town along in that education piece. I'm supposed to be on the school committee, finance subcommittee, warrant committee, and it's really challenging for me to make. It's really challenging for me to make a lot of those meetings. So, is there a plan to open that up for that transparency for the whole town?
Yeah, I think Lizzie and Mark are.
I mean, that's something that we're currently discussing. Mark actually brought that forward as an idea, and I think there's a lot, I would say, I think it's fair to say universal like appreciation for that concept of that. And I think what we're still ironing out is just making sure, and this is the theme of intentionality, that, you know, if and when we make that as like a commitment, that it would become a commitment that we are taking on, and recognizing the reason why it's necessary to have committee-wide discussion, which we haven't been able to have yet, and that's coming hopefully next week at our meeting. We've discussed it at the finance subcommittee level so far, where not all members have been present and able to participate in the discussion. I think we just recognize that, you know, if we chose to take that on as a commitment that we're making, we all recognize the value of the transparency it would bring, that we would be sort of choosing to create for ourselves like an additional threshold, like a higher threshold than currently exists for other subcommittees of other boards and committees throughout the town. And that, I believe, deserves like careful thought, just because we would be, I think, wanting to be careful not to just sort of start doing something, because yes, it makes a lot of sense, but the next thing you know, we don't actually have like infrastructure to do it. We would have to, it's like up to us to record our own meetings. And, you know, Mark pointed out, well, what happens if we've made the decision to do it, but then someone were to forget to record because we're busy, we're, you know, distracted, and then all of a sudden people are like, that meeting wasn't recorded, like something, you know, suspicious was happening during that meeting, when no, it's really, you know, just that we're really juggling a lot, and it would be a thing we would be taking on without support from MATV, which we do recognize would not be possible to receive support from them, because they are already like maxed out at their capacity. So it's a good question, Mark, you can feel free to add more, but I would just tell you, yes, we haven't made like a formal decision on it yet, because we recognize that it's sort of, we're making a decision that commits future generations of school committee members to it, you know what I mean? Because like, if in the future there was ever a finance committee that said, well, we're not required to do this, like no other board's finance subcommittee like records their meetings, no other subcommittee records their meetings, like that would be valid, but we recognize that is never good for transparency, to like offer something and then take it away. So that's my rationale for why we're just trying to have an actual thoughtful like process of basically weighing like the cost benefit of making that as a decision. So Mark, do you want to add anything?
Just from a timeline perspective, we brought it up a couple school committee meetings ago. There are a couple of things that have just been a timeline issue in terms of making the decision. Yeah, because the first time I brought it up, the two other members of the finance subcommittee actually weren't at the full school committee meeting. Then we talked about it, and then we were supposed to have a meeting Tuesday night this week where we were going to talk about it, and that got canceled. So there are some things like that. But we expect to have a follow-up conversation about that very thing, because for all the reasons you've said, and again, I think a lot of the things Lizzie is saying here are some of the conversations y'all were having last year about the Warrant article, right? And that other members of the town were coming in, and so it's a lot of those same kind of discussions, I think.
It's also like remote versus in person, right? Because it's like one thing, currently our finance meetings are happening all on Zoom, where it's relatively easier to record the meetings without technical assistance. So then what are we gonna do if we were to get to a place where we want our meeting in person for finance? But that would, so the point is, like, please stay tuned for that, but I totally hear you, and I think it's a shared recognition that, yes, like, it's a helpful step in that, it's an action, like you're saying, Peter, you know, to actually consider taking around adding the transparency piece. But I also just thinking of the timeline, you know, you're speaking from the schools subcommittee of the Warrant committee. I think one thing that I see laid out here is a little bit more sort of time earlier and more time with the school subcommittee, hopefully. And to make sure those meetings are obviously scheduled for the availability of your members, so that we can all be there and have those conversations. In past years, they've happened like kind of later in the process, and it's then been challenging to quickly turn around like responses to questions and things. I think if we are able to kind of back it up, that will help.
I would just add, and I feel like I say this about most things, I would encourage you not to let perfect be the enemy of good here. And I understand wanting to sort of future-proof any decisions you make, and while it's important to think those things through, I also think you do the best with the information you have now. And I personally think it's really critical for the town to be able to have that insight into those particular subcommittee meetings, especially with the potential of the debt exclusion on a ballot at some point. So that's my 2 cents.
That's a follow-up question, Mr. Chair, on that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too, because last year there was an article where we voted on this, the recording of the subcommittees. I remember that outcome was less than favorable, I think, right? The question I have is, you have meeting minutes? Do you publish them? I mean, so I think being able to tell the story of your budget along with a timeline is going to help it be relatable when folks that aren't in these meetings, and I think that's kind of what we need to together work on, right?
Yes, we definitely have meeting minutes. I'm responsible for the meeting minutes. So yes, we have those. We vote on them. Open to critique. Open to critique. Yeah, I mean, I don't think, you know, even good meeting minutes are no real substitute for the full, because it's not a word for word thing. So it's not quite. But again, I try and be somewhat detailed in my meeting minutes. I think my meeting minutes are better than many other boards I've seen minutes for, which are, but I won't name them specifically. But again, actually, you know, Charlene today, I need to make sure that they are posted, because I'm actually not sure if I've done the right thing this year of getting them posted, but we have them, they're approved, they're available for public records requests, but definitely we need to make sure that they are posted on the website. Anna sent over the facility advisory ones, and I was like, I don't know if I did that for finance yet. So they will be up soon if they're not already.
Cool. Thank you.
Anyone else have anything they'd like to?
Go, I'll take
No,
it.
you go ahead.
Sure.
Sure, why not?
Everyone's
Just
so
a
nice.
point, this is impressive, I thought. And I had a couple questions, but just before I have to talk about the Zoom thing. We talked about this here for this meeting, at the last meeting. They do have, if you're Zooming anyways, they do have AI add-ons that'll take notes for you that are pretty decent. Might make it a lot easier for you. And then you can distribute it. So it catches a lot of things. This is helpful. Thank you for the questions.
Oh, sure.
The frequently asked questions. On the budget offset, do we get 100% back? Is there a...
For the circuit breaker offset?
No, just on the question number 2. What is budget offset? And it's when we use revolving funds. was just wondering if we get 100% back when we charge for like school buses, athletics, preschool tuition.
So we have a fee schedule for certain, for transportation. There's a fee schedule that's presented to the school committee, and school committee has the opportunity to review and approve that annually. And so typically the budget offset only offsets a portion of the overall expense. So for transportation, we actually talked about transportation today, and I provided information. Oh, I'm sorry. The revenue that we receive for transportation only covers probably, I want to say, a third of the overall expense for transportation.
Okay.
Mhm.
So the 3.9, okay, you don't get it all back.
So the 3.9 is additional revenue that is received in addition to our budget appropriation that's used to fund expenses within the school department. So if our appropriation this year was 67 million, and I'm rounding, our gross expense to operate could be upwards of 71 million, but we've received in $4 million in outside revenue that helps to offset the overall expense of the school department operating
I
budget.
get it. Okay. I wasn't sure if it was like athletics, if it's like a one-for-one, like people. Okay.
No.
There's a contract up. Is it your contract up this year?
Yeah, we're just entering negotiations right now,
Okay. When is that done?
when it's done.
Oh, the contracts, yeah.
I mean, our goal is to get that done, quickly so that it doesn't drag into the following year. And that
In the
makes
budget
that-
process.
Yeah, that's more challenging. But we're starting our meetings now. We're going to begin end of November, and then, we hope to have a expeditious process, and, yeah.
Okay. Good. Do you know the population? Do you know what it is for this year in the school student population?
Enrollment?
Yes.
Total enrollment was 4,369.
Okay. Did it go up or down, or is it pretty stagnant? Went up.
What's the trend? The trend by like year by year? I don't know. I figure it's important to factor.
I mean, it depends on the grade level. So our grade levels it's not a consistent, like the number. The total number has rose this past year. It's been somewhat stable over the last number of years. And in the future, we can bring, I know you all have seen lots of enrollment charts, but definitely part of our process will be bringing forward, maybe in new and exciting ways, the enrollment to help to explicate kind of where the growth has happened. I know this has been looked at in relation to school building committee presentations. I think for us, it's a little bit different in the budget process in that we're kind of more primarily looking at who are we funding for right now, and of course, if we're making any kind of programmatic changes around what we expect in terms of, let's say, special ed programming and numbers, we may be looking at that kind of enrollment as well, in terms of like what we're funding for next year, or if, for example, if we were in the potential for an override, and we were looking out a couple of years, then we would want to be thinking about, okay, like we've started this program, we expect the growth here, we have this many students out of district now, we hope to bring back 6 students, and therefore, so those are the kinds of, in terms of enrollment, there are smaller numbers too that are important for us in terms of budgeting, and some of those smaller numbers carry big numbers too, in terms of cost.
Yeah, actually, that might be helpful if we got it by class or school or something. If we can get that.
Yeah.
I'll do my last question. What is your target, maybe it's by class too, I don't know if you have it, like, what is your target school size, classroom size?
So I would say our target It depends on the grade level and on the class, so there's not really one target. We cap out our elementary classes at 26. We do have 2 different tracks in elementary. We have French immersion and English innovation. Because students start French immersion and stay in French immersion, and if they leave or they move out of Milton, we don't add students back. Those classes tend to start higher in grade 1, and then we'll, depending on, what happens,
You
that
can't
they
jump
may
into
decrease
French
a little
immersion.
bit, whereas other classes might start, the English innovation might start at 23, 24, or something like that. So that's a ballpark. When you get into secondary, the numbers vacillate pretty significantly. You might have a class of 18, you might have a class of 28. So that depends on what the class is, the size of the classroom, the availability. So how many sections are there? How many students do we have? We do have some pressure right now for exploratory classes, elective classes at the middle school. So some of those class numbers are high. So some of that is just related to our staffing numbers as well. So a lot of variables.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, so I have Liz, Judy, and Allison in that order.
Thanks. So I had a question. I have 2 questions. I have one question from when Sean O'Rourke from the school building committee had come in, and I had asked, and I was told it was a more appropriate question for you, Dr. Burrows, which concerns.
I might say it's for her, though.
No, it's not. No, it's for you.
Okay.
It concerns the number of buses. So
Okay.
my question to
She's in charge of transportation.
no, I'm asking you. So
I'm kidding.
So, my question for Sean was really regarding if a new upper middle school were to be built.
Yep.
The fact that 5th grade students who currently live, unless they decide, move and then decide, generally live within a mile of their elementary school, and so it's a little bit easier to get to, are now going to an upper middle school. In my case, it'd be kind of far away from my house, where we already don't have enough buses. Is there a plan for that? I know that there is a real challenge for people to get their children on transportation. And so I'm just interested in your thoughts on that, even outside of the
Yeah.
scope of a new upper middle school as well.
So it's funny because we talked about that today as well, and talked about it last year too. I shared this morning in our meeting that I feel we're close to meeting capacity now, but not quite. So we're short about 2 buses, and having personally talked with a lot of the families that struggle with transportation, and knowing that the overall cost of adding 2 buses, and we could also charge a fee for that too, so we get some revenue back to offset that Katie mentioned, that it to both improve student performance, to kind of support families and life in 2024 is pretty complex, and getting your students to and from school when you don't live close to school is challenging. So I think that's something that we'll be coming back to you all, and the school committee hasn't really kind of weighed in on this, but we started talking about it today. So I think that's going to be a topic for this year. I think in terms of the upper middle school, I can't say exactly what the impact will be in terms of additional buses. I don't imagine it would add, and you've worked more closely on routes. It could add a bus, but I don't know. Do you have any inkling on that?
I think we would just, in planning, we would just have to be mindful of the timing to see if we could potentially, depending on what the start and end time of school is, if we could potentially have that align with one of the other schools so that they could share kind of the bus fleet in order to accommodate the students, so that we wouldn't have to, that we'd be able to transport the students with our current, the current number of buses that we already have, that we're already paying for within the contract.
Aren't we not obligated to transport after 6th grade? Not that that's the direction we want to go,
Yeah,
but.
right, it's through 6th grade.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is, I think, it's interesting for families who
Yeah.
go to Pierce, they get transportation for 1 year, and they're like, wait, what happened?
Yes.
Yeah.
And one thing that came up this morning is that we're actually in the 5th year of a contract that had been a 3-year contract with 2 extension years. So it's, we'll be going out for bid for a new setup one way or another. So it's a great opportunity. And I feel like the timing is great in order to rethink sort of how we're approaching this. And that, we'll be continuing to talk.
I had a second question before he calls on someone else. So I wanted to just talk to you, again, Dr. Burrows. I read your priority report, I think that's what it's called, when it came around in the first place, and I'm aware that you did all this listening tour, and I really appreciate that. You know, I have a child at Collycott and one that's going to start next year there as well. I wanted to, I have the opportunity at my job, has some flexibility that I'm able to go to a lot of the PTO meetings and these kinds of meetings, but not everybody has that same opportunity. And so I wanted to hear from you about how you're making sure that in this budgetary process, I'm not able to watch all of these meetings, and I watch all of the meetings, how you're making sure that a really diverse view, different pools of people are being reflected when you're having that intentionality about the values that we want to reflect. We're making sure that we have each different community within the schools, and then also Milton as a whole, even people who don't have school-age children, seniors, people whose children are not of that age yet, people who don't have kids, et cetera.
So I think that primarily has come about, our conversation around that, as we've been thinking about our previous process, which has been, I would say, hasn't thought about it in that way. And we've had a traditional budget hearing, which I think we discussed recently, and are in conversation now. We don't have our kind of calendar of dates yet in terms of after we built the budget, kind of going out and sharing that and getting feedback. But we've talked about the need to think differently around how we're engaging the community, and not expecting that all people are going to tune in at 7 o'clock for a school committee meeting. We might get 5 or 6 people, but we're not going to get 500 or 600.
And you don't get Warrant committee numbers. I'm only kidding.
So your statement aligns with what we're talking about in terms of developing a process as we are going through this budget development to engage as many people as possible in as many different ways and mediums as possible.
Can I just add to that? One of the things that I'm really excited about this year, that I think is something that I've done in the past but not consistently, is that we're engaging our student reps who are a part of the school committee in the budget process. And so we've met with them, and just to let them know that we want their voices to be heard and that we want them to be a part of the process. I think that work that is going to have to continue, not just for this year, but it's going to be kind of a long-term goal for us all to be able to get them really involved in the process as well, and even to be able to potentially have our middle school students and even our elementary school students involved. So I know when we talk about it a lot, we talk about how we're going to kind of engage all of the adults, which is really important, but we're also doing some pretty good work in engaging our students, because again, making sure that the budget is reflective of what their needs truly are.
I think that's very innovative, to listen to the children themselves. I think that's interesting. I haven't heard of that before, so thank you.
Yeah.
All right, that's it for me. Thank you.
Judy, you still have your hand raised?
Yes, thank you. In regards to the bus, I seem to not remember how much was allocated in the past for buses. Could a member of the committee just give an approximation what each bus route costs? And I know contracts change, you're up for a contract, you could get a better deal, you could have a rising, an increase in the cost of buses with a new contract. Could you pull up that number out of your head perhaps, or how much each route costs, each bus that we pay for?
Buses are expensive.
They are expensive.
They're very
Transportation.
Yeah, I imagine they are, and I seem to have lost the information from last year perhaps in my...
So I don't know if it would be helpful, but I shared just more context, but I also shared the current fiscal year 25 transportation budget as a part of the presentation this morning. So I don't know if maybe that would be helpful, that I could share that. That budget contains it's reflective of our 12 bus fleet that we're currently paying for. And then I also mentioned that we pay a fuel surcharge that's per the contract. And then there's a small amount of funding that's allocated to some extracurricular. So I can certainly share that presentation. Because it's a negotiation year, I hesitate to get into too much detail, as we'll be going out to bid, but I can certainly share that. I don't know if that would be helpful or...
Yeah, it must have been on, the budget from last year, and
Sure. Yep.
I didn't zero in on that number for some reason, and...
It's over $1 million for regular ed transportation. The exact number, I don't have it in front of me right now. But that's the gross expense.
Per bus is 80,000?
When we added a bus last year, it was 90.
90.
Yeah.
Now, if I could ask this question, I don't have children whose age would be in the MPS, and so I am not aware of some things. But I do hear from speaking with parents in town that there really aren't enough seats on the buses for everyone, and there becomes a waiting list.
Yep.
Would you think that a budget expansion to include all of those that really want or need to be on those buses would be appropriate?
Yes.
And add buses?
Yeah, yes, I do.
Do you know, or do you have an idea why perhaps it hasn't already been done?
I think it's a culture that's been here for, I think it's been many, many years that we haven't been meeting capacities. I think it came out of probably the fact that we're required by Massachusetts law to transport through grade 6, but not grades 7 through 12. So I think that's probably the genesis of this, was we're not required to. So we're going to, maybe it started with, we have additional space on buses, so you can we charged a fee and you can ride, and then, so I think that question probably goes back many years in terms of how it started that way. My own personal belief and what I shared this morning and previously was I think there are enough benefits to students and families to provide transportation to all students to make it a worthwhile investment on a lot of different levels.
Okay, thank you.
Allison, if I can just skip you, I just had a very quick question. We're talking a lot about buses, and I just have a question. I don't want to come back to it, but a late bus. A late bus at the elementary? And again, I know it's a lot of money. And is that part of the conversation? I'm just hearing it from other parents and my wife.
What's a late bus?
There used to be a late bus in town for the middle school and the high school. I think it came at like 3:30 or 4 o'clock. It's one of those like late loop buses. I remember I took one a long time ago from Paris, so like go throughout the entire town. Mm-hmm. And I don't know when we had that last, but people have mentioned it to me. Yeah. I don't really have any information about it, but I didn't know if that was like...
I feel like it came up once, not recently, maybe last year, and I think the feedback I heard from leaders was the end times for all of the different clubs and activities are so staggered that it's the investment in the buses, because it's not one bus, it's probably a number of buses, it's hard to like find a time where you're going to get enough kids on that bus to make it worthwhile.
No, that makes sense. You want it full. Mm-hmm. Given the amount of money
going
that
on, you've got the high school has like 30, 40 clubs that all meet at different times and for different lengths of time. So I think that is the challenge of that.
Sure.
But we're never close to looking at those things.
Yeah, I just thought I'd ask, just so it's something that just people have brought up, and I just thought it was interesting. Allison, my apologies. Are you still there?
I'm here. So yeah, thanks everyone for the information. This is my third year on budget, so I've learned quite a bit. I would say that, I really hope this year that the school budget can be supported by the warrant. I understand the last few years has been challenging because of the level budget that's, last year we were down 750,000 on positions. And, the first year I came in, we really fought for interventionists and, the importance of moving that needle. And as I continue to go through these reports, I just want to emphasize the importance of, moving that needle. And so, we had to get a 4th grade interventionist that last year and under a different budget. So, I think really this year, focusing on how we move that needle will be based on the positions that we need to hire. Because as we see the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders that are still continuing to struggle, we really need to put those dire requests in for those type of resources to really make some gains. So I will be a big advocate for adding more of those types of positions, and really, I just want to put on the emphasis of that, whether we go forward with the school or not, our primary focus needs to be on the kids and their education. So that for me is part of that, and so I really fear with the debt of the positions that we are going to lose from ARPA and the new contracts and the new bus transportation, that we're really going to have to look at these numbers and really look at exceeding expectations on that level-based budget, so that we can really make some ground here. Because as I've been here for 3 years, we have yet to move that needle. So that means to me that, those interventionists that we fought for 3 years ago still haven't been enough, and we've been adding. So I've always been a big advocate for that. So I just want to, as we go into these next levels, that we really look at that being as the importance. But I do think that if we can do that, we can, really, look to the town, and the town can say that, we're really putting in the necessary steps. I have a question too. If can I have, the attendance list too, besides the enrollment? Is that something, I had that question.
What do you mean by attendance list?
Well, so like the enrollment's not necessarily what is, because there's people that move and they go private. So the enrollment could be different than the actual attendance. So if it was possible to be broken down by school, like kind of so that we can really do a deep dive on the amount of kids that are in, because like I've had friends that are considered part of they're still getting mail, like in emails, that their kids were a part of the MPS school system. And so I was just curious if there's an actual attendance list, because I'm assuming that a lot of these students that leave, or they're not there every day, so they're considered part of possibly the enrollment, but they're not actually, that's different than like the actual attendance.
Yeah, those students who are no longer attending are not counted in the enrollment number.
They're unenrolled.
Yeah. So our enrollment numbers would include students who are attending Milton Public Schools. Sometimes there are hiccups around communication where a family will go private or something, and they'll still get some communication. And this came up last year, and I believe we fixed whatever problem that was when it came up.
Sure.
So yeah, but that has nothing to do with our system, which we report this to DESE. So we have an official number, which is the actual number of students enrolled in school. But we will provide that information. I know this came up earlier in terms of breaking it down by classroom or by school, so that you can have like a real good sense of all of our students.
Awesome. And, and I just hope that you from my beginning discussion, the resources, just working together to create kind of the next steps so that we can, really look at that what's needed for the older students, and anything that we can do to support that. As you know, for those who have known me for a few years, I'm a big advocate of interventionists and really moving that to the right direction. So hopefully, as you continue to build that budget, we can work together to see what's needed in there, so that we can move that dial as well.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Aman, and then Jay.
I was going to ask, you were mentioning earlier about outreach, and I was curious to kind of know the incentives that you're doing, especially if you're also trying to avoid it from affecting the budget too much. And I think another question was just also like understanding like logistic challenges you guys are currently facing.
I think when it comes to logistics, and in talking about the budget calendar, truly, and of course I think it's difficult because this is my first year here. It's really tricky because of the timing. So the beginning of the school year is such an incredibly busy time for our teachers, for our students, for our administrators. And so to start the budget process in September, and to truly be spending a lot of time on it in October, which is what we're doing now. But it's a pretty big commitment, and it just feels like sometimes like there's so much analysis and data, and there's so much information that we want to pull. And sometimes that can be tricky because it feels like we simply like are running out of time. But I think just each year the process will become better, and we'll have that data, we'll create that foundation, and we'll be able to improve on it. But yeah, I think logistically, it's just, for me, it feels like just the timing can be a little bit tricky.
I would just add that if you look through the action plan, you'll see that 3.3 and our third strategic priority is around building a strong budgetary process. So that is something that we are focused on doing really well, and then iterating that year after year and getting better. So we're not going to come in front of you next year and be like, you know, in a completely different place with a completely different process. We're going to build the system this year, and then we're going to improve it year after year. So that's the way to allow the logistics to actually support the process. One thing that we don't want to do is get to a reactive place where we're running out of time. We're running out of time to have the conversations we need to have with people. Any change you make in a budget, it's really easy to get on a computer and make a change in a budget, but a budget in school systems is over 80% people. And so when you're making changes in a budget, you have to be mindful of your community and have communication prior to making those kinds of changes and making sure that everyone's on the same page. So the process that Katie has laid out is focused on creating that kind of culture.
I appreciate it. Especially I asked because I remember, Tom, you were mentioning about like the late bus and when it comes to like logistics around that, I was always curious about the trade-offs between like what you guys are kind of like examining right now. But I think Jay had a...
Yeah, Jay.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, thank you. Jay Funling. I really appreciated what I just heard from Dr. Burrows in that last answer about, and you said this also when you started out, a deliberate process, a process that's not going to wildly shift from year to year. That's, I really liked hearing that, because the town likely is looking at a override this spring, possibly in April. And when I've looked at other towns that have had successful overrides in recent years, often they put to their voters long ahead of time, here's a 5-year plan. We're not asking you just for some chunk of money to get through this year and then we'll figure it out. But voters, residents, here's what we think we're going to spend for the next 5 years. Here's what we're asking you for an override. We're not going to ask for another one in the next 5 years. And we've got a plan. You know, we're not just flying by the seat of our pants. You know, we've had conversations about this. We've talked to Mr. Milano about this. So where am I going with this? So when it comes to making a long-term plan, I always use the library as my example. They're a non-controversial example. If the library wants to hire somebody this year, and maybe 3 years from now they want to hire somebody else, that's not going to blow up any long-term budget plan. But in order to make a long-term budget plan, to put it in front of the residents well ahead of any vote, I think we're going to need from you, like, not only, I mean, I think last year you, going off the top of my head, you asked for 10 people and you got 4 of them, so now that's 6 that you asked for last year. But then last year you might have also said, but we have some more coming, and that's all before bringing on Miss
Blake.
80. Blake. Yes. Sorry. So I know things may be different. I guess what I'm in a roundabout way trying to say is, it would be great to know as soon as possible, yes, we're going to want 10 new employees this year, and then 5 the year after that, and 10 the year after that, and then we'll be good for the next couple of years, or something along those lines. And it's I mean, you addressed it yourself. You can talk about it forever, and then at some point you have to make the decision. And so I guess what I'm asking you is, can we, sooner rather than later, get a multi-year plan, a multi-year request from you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely how we're approaching this budget is, you know, I was mentioning the systems development we're doing and thinking about our needs going into FY26. We're not going to be fully baked on a lot of that work. For some of that work is going to span over 2 years, and then there are tweaks to it over the following year. So definitely we will be coming forward. We're not going to present 3 different budgets probably, you know, like here's what FY27 will look like in total, but definitely we will share kind of what we see, kind of development of needs over time, as well as like really specific needs in FY26. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And I mean, I guess following up on that, we have not, appropriately, we haven't really discussed new school issues tonight because that's not the topic of conversation. But if we're looking at an override that's going to cover operating expenses for the next 5 years, I think that would have to be something we need to plug in.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, I do have.
Oh, you're okay? Oh,
Liz.
okay, thanks. Sort of two questions again, but I try to make them be one. So, I am curious, Allison kindly mentioned the ARPA funding, and that was on my mind too, Allison, so thank you for that. I'm wondering if there's any other federal or state funding that we received in the past that is also going away, or any additional federal or state funding that we see coming online. And also, similarly, if there are any additional sort of regulatory requirements that we see coming down the pike that's going to cost us additional money, or may cost us additional money in the future, sort of to Jay's point. So that's my first question. And then my second question is sort of, I don't know if it's appropriate time to talk about it, but I was looking at some of your capital improvement requests. And so a lot of them seem, like capital improvements, but some of them are sort of safety related, like the external doors and things like that. I'm just sort of curious on where we are in those requests and that process, and if you'll be requesting those sorts of things again, whichever one you want to answer first.
Sure.
I don't know, but.
So relative to federal funds and kind of what we expect, so we did, last year was the year where ARPA rolled off.
Right.
So we currently have those positions that were initially ARPA now funded.
Right.
So we will not have that same drop.
Yep.
Our increase last year was more significant because we had to make up for some of those positions. So we're in a good position relative to ARPA. We expect our other federal grants to be flat somewhat, so we don't expect a precipitous drop on any of federal funds currently. Regulatory.
No, you didn't say
changes?
state funds.
State funds?
Same.
Yeah, I think same, yeah.
All right. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, yeah, regulatory, do you know of any regulatory impacts? None strike me that would be significant in planning FY26 or beyond.
Not that we currently know about. That's another tricky part too, is sometimes those will come up in April. Or one of the implications that that was passed along to the school departments was the tuition increase for our special education out-of-district programs, private programs. And I'm sure there were conversations about that, but that was something, I think that's a really good example. And that was a 14% tuition increase, and so that was really significant. We talked about that a little bit, I think 2 weeks ago at Finance Subcommittee. This year, we've been informed of the rate increase for the out-of-district tuitions, and it's 3.42%. So not under 2.5, but it's better than the 14. And so I think we're trying to, as soon as we hear any information about regulations, about any implication, we're trying to make sure that we incorporate that into the budget. So nothing new for now, but keep you posted.
Yeah, our capital requests, in terms of security and safety, those aren't major changes. Those are more upkeep rather than bringing in new systems and things like that. We are in a position right now of all of our schools were renovated at the same time. And all of our systems are coming due at the same time. So it's something that's one of the main things we're talking about in our capital conversations is how do we address all these needs right away? We have other needs that are looming as well, right? So there's a lot for us to juggle in terms of making sure that our buildings stay in the great shape that they're in, and we fund the FY26 budget and all the other needs that we have. So if you look at the 3-year kind of plan right now with capital, where we're looking at like rooftop units over 3 years and doing like partial as opposed to doing them all at the same time. Because another approach would be we're gonna go all in on rooftop units for HVAC, and we're just gonna replace all of those. But the idea is to try to get to a more staggered reality as opposed to doing everything at the same time and then having that expense be challenging to budget for. But 2003 roughly is the age of a lot of our boilers, HVAC systems, everything else. And in the industry, 20 years is like a kind of a standard. So we're definitely, but we're gonna try to eke out what we can with units that are still working and boilers that might not be cutting edge anymore, but are still operating. So, I think we've got a good handle on that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep.
Dr. Burrows and everybody, thank you for coming. Dr. Burrows and I had a really nice conversation a couple of weeks ago, and I guess for everybody else's benefit, I no longer have children that are in the MPS system. So I want to set the table by saying I'm a really big fan of investing heavily in infrastructure and putting smart dollars to work to get returns on that. And so the types of things that I'm interested in, and I have a list of FAQ questions that could go on for you after the meeting, but
great.
I guess one of the things, I'm glad you brought up the special ed out of district comment, and I think it's really important for all town citizens to know, and the conversation came up was how large a portion of the school budget that has become. And so critical pieces like that need to be kept in mind, I think are really important to inform town members as they think about potential overrides, et cetera. I think one of the other things, the real question that I have is, I'm interested in understanding the incremental impact of an additional dollar of investment and what that means. And the biggest question I have for the group is, how do you intend to measure impact of investments in programmatic, additional staffing, et cetera? There's some things you can obviously track, like grades or graduation rates, but there's a lot of fuzzy impact things that I think are critical to know and track to understand are tax dollars being used wisely. And so what is your plan, or what systems do you have in place to measure that impact?
That's a good question. I mean, sometimes it's like, you've got a big cauldron and you're making soup, and you've got 200 ingredients, and you add another ingredient, and you try to taste, did that make an impact or not, right? Because there's so many ingredients, there's so many inputs, and so many factors, so many mediating factors in terms of educational outcomes. So I think it's something that drives researchers across the world in looking at this and trying to better understand it, which is, I think, exciting and really important in this work. In terms of how we are going about measuring impact and investment impact is going to be, as articulated in the action plan, is a yearly, we're not going to do this once a year, but the culmination each year of our work on the implementation plan and each year's action plan is going to be an implementation plan report, which will have kind of key performance indicators that we've identified that, again, instead of choosing kind of different benchmarks each year and saying, this year we're looking at graduation rate, next year we're looking at third grade reading, the following year we're going to look at participation in extracurricular activities. So it's hard, again, because there are so many different data points to look at. It's challenging to say like 100% this investment was there's no like one-to-one, right?
No,
it's circuitous.
I get it. It's a
Yeah.
multivariable equation.
But the important thing for us to do in terms of both our investment in our students and then outcomes is tracking how our investments are producing the results that we want. So that annual report will be an opportunity for us at a kind of a public level to analyze the work that we've done and not just like throw up a bunch of spreadsheets, but there's some narrative to that too in terms of what are we investing in terms of professional development, professional learning, changes to systems, and then what are the outcomes connected to all that work that we're doing? What outcomes are we generating, and what do we need to do in the following year if our outcomes are not shifting or changing and they're static or they're going down or they're not going up as quickly as we think they should, then we're going to make changes, and which is why the action plan is a year-long plan from the implementation plan, which is kind of like a broad, right, high level, so that we can be strategic year by year, and looking at that data, we can make changes and respond to move those data points in the direction that we need them to go.
And can you give me some quick example of, I can guess at what's easy to measure, what's hard, what sort of outcomes are hard to measure?
I mean, the outcomes, I mean, MCAS is a great example. It's ballot measure too, right? Mm-hmm. Have you read about all the? Yeah. So that explains it in a nutshell, essentially. What does it mean, right? What does a score on this summative assessment mean in terms of a student's abilities, in terms of their readiness for life after high school, in terms of the kinds of things they need on a kind of a relational or social emotional level, in terms of being able to move into a job and be a leader and work well with colleagues, and right, like there are just so many factors involved in determining like what success is, which is why we, part of the work that we did last year in talking about what do we want for our students is also putting on the table for our community, what do we believe success looks like? And there is kind of like, I think, a composite of like what we believe success is. So when you look at our implementation plan, and it's got 3 different areas, one's academic excellence, which is our main and primary focus, but another one is climate, culture, and well-being, in that we also want to make sure that our students are ready to thrive in the world, and just focusing on academics alone is not enough. And also accessing academics, it's students have to be in the right space to be able to do that. So I don't know if I answered your question completely, but
yes and no. I think my viewpoint is that just because it's difficult to measure doesn't mean we shouldn't measure it. It's just a question of what do you do with the data that you are measuring.
Yep.
And make sure that you're not measuring things just for the sake of measuring things.
And I would say that's definitely our goal, and that's why we're, our data needs to be actionable. And if we just look at data but we don't know how we got there or what we're doing, and we don't have any kind of systemic response to it, it's really hard to respond to it, right? Because if you look at student outcomes and you have no systemic response, to be able to move those data points, you can't just try harder, right? You have to have some kind of like something you're implementing, something you're doing differently than what you're currently doing. And I think that's kind of like undergirds all of the work that we're launching.
Okay. Julia.
Hopefully a quick question. I've got a kindergartner, and we were told a few times this summer that this is the largest kindergarten class they've ever had. Is that accurate?
I think it's the second largest.
Third largest. Third largest.
Third largest? Okay.
Like ever in the history of Milton Public Schools?
Going back to third largest, going back to 1994, which is the first, or 1995, which is the first year DESE has data on their profile.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
I guarantee there are people in town who know back further than 94.
It's pretty small.
Sure.
When it comes to the action plan, the implementation plan, and, you know, constantly like collecting data, it's like a year-long process, kind of piggybacking when it comes to measuring impact, like what are you guys doing as far as like how often would you guys find yourself making changes based on the data periodically, especially if you're trying to, you know, hit your goals?
I think the place that happens most frequently is in the classroom. So teachers collect two kinds of data, formative and summative data. So formative data they're using, it's an assessment. If you were my student in class and I give you a formative assessment, I take that information, you take this little assessment, I collect it, and then I might change my instruction based on what it looks like you know and maybe don't know yet, and where we need to focus instruction. So that's feedback for the teacher to be able to shift and change instruction to get you to the standard that they're teaching. So that's a constant process in the classroom, is shifting and changing instruction to be able to have you understand, here's the target that we're headed towards. For me to know, okay, this is where you are now, and I know you need to get here, so I'm going to do these things to help you get to that end goal. And one of the things that we also have within our schools over the last couple of years is diagnostic assessments, which are 3 times a year in math and in literacy. And those are foundational, I think, in terms of helping to understand where students are in terms of grade level, at a percentile ranking. Those also align with MCAS as well in terms of MCAS outcomes. MCAS is hard to use because it's once a year. It's more of an accountability measure, and it's less helpful in terms of obviously a day-to-day kind of reality of the classroom.
I appreciate it. So like how frequent are the changes? So is it just that you guys are acting on the data? Is it just every few months, or?
I mean, I think it's, in the classroom, it's daily because that's good teaching. Collecting data and responding to data. You know, as Andrew mentioned, you don't want to collect data just to collect data, or to make it look like you're doing something when you're not really doing anything. So the data collection needs to be meaningful. We need to know why we're collecting the data we're collecting. We need to know what it represents. It needs to be valid and reliable data.
Yeah. And I appreciate the clarity, especially like the one with the whole analogy around the cauldron and the ingredients. I was kind of drawing a little witch and everything.
I think that probably was just because Halloween's tomorrow. I think it was. I didn't even think of that. But I think
Potion.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Does anybody have anything else they'd like to ask or comment on without a guest here? Can I ask something?
Yeah.
And it might be more appropriate for you, Katie, but obviously everyone, Mark also, just, I saw it in the calendar, and, you know, speaking with Lori and everybody in the finance subcommittee about your quarterly one report. And just being new, when you were kind of compiling that and looking at the numbers, is there anything that you learned, just about our process in the town, like good, bad, no specifics, but just, you know what I mean? I just like, did you, obviously to orient yourself to these future plans, is there anything that stood out to you, I think, just?
I think that there are definitely some areas, just specifically kind of looking from a process standpoint. There's areas where having the opportunity of being in other districts, that there's some places that we can improve.
Sure.
And it's even just from kind of a systems perspective of we're still very much paper-based. And so for me, before working in education, I worked corporate in Boston, and I never printed anything. And so I think the amount of paper that we use here in Milton, in kind of the process. But again, we've talked a lot about the implementation plan and the priority report, and that's something that we called out that was already identified before I started working here. But it's pretty glaring as you come into a system and come into a new role and say, these are the tools that I need to be successful, and some of it kind of needs work. So I think it's fine, and it's a good opportunity. I think just for me, we've talked a little bit about it, and what I hope to do is really bring in kind of best practice, certainly from a budget perspective. And so looking at making sure that we truly are utilizing best practice in creating the budget and administering the budget is really important, and I think that that's something that we'll just continue to work on.
Okay, I appreciate it, and as you were answering, I could have asked the question better. Just given your experience with other districts, so I kind of meant like, was there any? But like to shift it, I wasn't really focusing on anything bad. I'm saying like, were there things you were surprised about, that you were happy that Milton was doing, things that were consistent with other districts? I mean, I don't know. It's just, it's really a very broad question.
And I apologize because I definitely, and that's something that we've also talked a lot about, is that we can't lose sight of the fact that like Milton is a really amazing place, and we're doing a lot of really good things.
Yes.
And I am so sorry because I immediately focused on kind of like what I need to do to ensure that I'm improving the system and what I'm seeing that we can do better. But no, it's a great, and we talked about that with our student reps during the course of the budget process, and even with the staffing and the people that I have the opportunity to engage with on a daily basis. There is so much intellectual capital. There are so many people that are so invested in our students. There are wonderful students, and just the community just really finds so much value in education and in our students. And I think that that is great, and that is really motivating for us, because we truly want to do what's best, right? And being able to support them. And so there's so much of that here, and so it's really wonderful. So thank you. Sorry that I went the wrong.
The Warrant Committee tends to go for the bad.
I apologize.
And I didn't mean to do that.
I said her budget was great.
Well, there we go.
They did something innovative, asking the students.
This has been a very positive meeting.
Yeah, except for me. I apologize.
I said you were innovative.
What you can see is Katie already is she has high standards for the work that she does, and that's why we're really lucky to have you here. Not that we've always had high standards, obviously, so that's not a comment on what came before you, so much as it's exciting because, and that's this whole team does bring like fresh eyes. That's kind of where we started. Like, I just, all the challenges we all see looming notwithstanding, okay, like, I'm optimistic about it because we have great capacity here. I know you all do too, so, you know, I think it bodes well. Let's think positive.
Yeah, of course, you always should. So you should always start. Lori had her hand up, so I'm going to call her.
And I would just like to really compliment you, Katie, on the work that you've been doing, because I think I've been seeing I've been getting a lot more clarity from your reports and the level of detail and the explanations that, you know, it could be just that I'm in my third year and it's really clicking. But I mean, really, the detail itself has been terrific.
Thank you.
And really appreciate the work and the level of, again, the detail that you're providing and the clarity that has been. So, thank you.
Sure.
Look forward to working with you.
Thank you. Me too.
Okay. Everyone else set? Well, thank you so much.
Thank
we
you.
really appreciate it. Dr. Carroll,
Yeah.
Dr. Burrows,
Yeah, thank you.
Mark, Katie, very nice to meet you.
You as well.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Happy Halloween.
Yes.
Happy Halloween.
Luck with your soup and your cauldron. It was just a stew. I
Gonna have to go
don't think you're doing Halloween at all.
I newt. Right?
No.
Thank
Well, I
you.
was also a high school English teacher, so, you know, Macbeth.
Oh.
There you go.
That's right. There you go.
Halloween on the nose here.
Thank you.
Thanks, thanks again. Nice evening, Dr. Carroll. Appreciate it. Yep. Okay. Well, you know, we're cognizant of the time, but I think we would miss an opportunity to discuss, if we'd like, just some of what was presented today. If anybody has any comments, questions for other members, feel free to ask. I know it's kind of more of an executive approach to what they're doing, and an executive summary type approach, and so I don't know if anybody has anything to say. Now's the time.
I'm glad to get an overview before we get their whole proposal. I'm glad that we're meeting now. I'm glad that we're going to meet again. I'm glad to get an insight into sort of the context of what we're going to be doing before they present it. I think that's very helpful.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone on Zoom? Well, I think it was very helpful, and I was very appreciative of them coming in, discussing the work that Dr. Carroll and the team are doing at the schools. You know, we're going to see a lot more of them, you know, moving forward into fall. Just get their opinions on certain things. But, you know, according to their calendar, I think traditionally, you know, December is the drop date for them. And, you know, we'll be working on some other stuff too, obviously with some of the other committees, and our February meeting, most likely. Senior citizen, maybe debt exclusion, most likely, so.
They'll come back in December and present their budget.
And they can come back at any time. You know, if we feel a need for them to come.
February, March.
If at any time that we feel a need for someone to come in, we can call them in and ask them to explain and discuss and answer questions on any matter. I mean, I trust that traditionally we have the schools in several times. Sometimes we just have the budget director in past years to clear things up, kind of a pre-meet before the school committee. The school committee will come as a whole usually and discuss issues with us and advocate for their position. So we're going to be, this is not, you know, only one out of 2 or 3 opportunities. They'll be back. Hi, Jay.
I think it'll also be good to hear from our own school subcommittee what they're learning as they learn it. And not to put a member on the spot, but if I were not addressing the chair, I might address someone sitting next to you and say, have you learned something recently? I mean, it sounds like you've been asking lots of questions. Have you learned something interesting to share?
And I actually haven't been asking a lot of questions.
Okay.
if there's any follow-up questions from the meetings, like we had one this morning on transportation, and there was a presentation, which I haven't asked for yet, but I will, and I can share it. But it, talked about the buses and just the challenges, and, that what we learned this morning, or I learned, was that we also are required by MGL to bus to parochial schools or private schools, which I did not know. I
was
that.
really surprised by that.
Really?
I did know that.
I was too.
You did?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
So does that mean that which we didn't have clarity on actually, so St. Mary's, St. Agatha's, Milton Academy?
Yeah.
We have to bus to Milton Academy?
Yeah.
Interesting.
If they want. I mean,
Yeah,
maybe not
well,
everybody takes us up on that. I'd be curious to know the number of people that.
Well, right, isn't that a list
I
of
would like
things?
to
I'd
know
like
the
to know
number
how
of
many people there.
People and how much that costs. Yeah, that would be interesting to know. Thank you so much. That's helpful.
Is there a charge for the bus if somebody takes,
There's a charge for 7th through 12,
but not elementary?
Or if you're within the 2-mile radius.
or if you're within the 2 miles.
Yep, we pay.
And we
1 to
didn't.
6 is free though, has to be free.
K to
If you're
6.
if you're further than 2 miles.
K to
from your
6,
school.
yes.
It's fine.
So what I don't know, one of the other things was around the criteria of how they talk about the wait list, like who gets on. So are they busing? And they didn't go through that, but who are they allowing on the bus once they hit capacity or at the wait list? You get your K through 6 kids have to go. And then you have K through 6 that are within 2 miles that want the bus. 7th to 12th that don't get the bus, but they are like beyond 2 miles. So, or do you give it to them before the elementary kids that are within the 2 miles? Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So I don't have that level of detail, but I'm sure they have that.
Another.
There's someone who may be able to contribute to this conversation.
Judy.
Hi, thanks.
Judy.
So Lori, if I could.
Yep.
There's a requirement to allow students in grades 1 through, did you say 5 or 6?
K through 6.
K through 6.
Yes.
I'm just going to throw out a hypothetical here, and just to understand it. So we have bus A, let's just call it bus A, and it holds 20 children, hypothetical. And there's 15 children going to MPS on that hypothetical bus. And so there are only 5 spots left for the independent schools, or it doesn't matter whether it's independent or MPS. They must provide public, I'll just call it public transportation.
It doesn't matter. If they ask for the bus service K through 6 going to MPS or private, it's an obligation via
If
Mass
they're
General
further
law.
than 2 miles.
If they're further than 2 miles.
Okay. And I think it was Liz. Liz, I lost my screen. I don't know what it is with me, this computer, and Zoom, but I can hear you all, and you apparently can hear me.
Yes.
But Liz, I think you indicated that you were surprised it went to Milton Academy?
Well, just St. Mary's.
No, I'm not surprised by that.
St. Agatha's, the private schools in general. I didn't realize that.
I don't know.
I am not surprised
St.
by
Agatha's and St. Mary's Hills, do they utilize bus service? Do they
don't
avail
know.
themselves of
We have
that?
to find out.
I think it's an individual
Question.
student thing,
Yeah, it's a student thing.
not a school.
So it'd be,
specific thing.
okay, so the potentially like the allocation of like a whole bus to pull
No.
off the route and then like pick up a couple of kids and drop them off at St. I'm just,
No, normally you would kind of have them go to a central location. I don't know how it works here, but my experience, so like for example, I live within 2 miles of St. Agatha's. If I wanted to send my children there, they would pick up my kids, drive them to St. Agatha's. I don't know at what point it is on the route,
I
but
think these are all the questions we could.
we'd have to ask.
I can, I'm usually very private, but I can share. When I first came to the town of Milton 44 years ago, I came for the school bus. And that is because, and I always express it as, well, in the way back days when dinosaurs were just going extinct, you could get the school bus to an independent school. And at the bus stop, there were children going to different schools, MPS and an independent school. So the pickup was the same. And so it would be however the bus route went. Say they got to Tucker before they went down Brook to get to Center. And so they dropped, and I'm just, you know, it was so long ago, so far away. So if they got to Tucker first, all the Tucker children would get off. And then, say now they're, for some reason or other, they had to go to Glover. And so then they would drop the Glover kids, and then, you know, they'd make a route like you would if you're going out to do errands. You know, I'm going to stop here, then I'm going to loop and stop here, then I'm going to loop and stop here, and then drive home. And I thought they had discontinued that. And so, Lori, I was surprised to hear you say that, because I thought it went, well, the way of the dinosaurs, because bus transportation got so expensive. But in a way, I am encouraged, because obviously these are children that, you know, reside in our town, their families, and kind of why not, right? They are part of our community, these independent schools that they go to. Okay, well, thank you.
Absolutely.
And I can't find my mute button, Tom, because I don't know what I do when I'm on this Zoom. All right, so I'll be quiet, but I'm done.
Come on down, Judy.
I know. I should come in person. It's so small up there in the Cronin, Tom.
Only a couple more weeks.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
And so I remember looking one night, there were a lot of people in that room because of the presentations, and I said, boy, it's a good thing 4 of us are on Zoom.
Yeah. Thank you, Judy. Looking forward to having you back.
Okay, thank you, Tom. I apologize again for my ineptness with this program.
It's fine, Judy. Anyone else? It's a lot. We'll talk more.
I had something unrelated to say. I don't know if now's the appropriate time.
Does it have anything to do with schools, fiscal year 2026?
It has to do with something else. I can't say what it was about, but I'll tell you.
Well, there is something else on our agenda for most of you returning members.
Yes.
Minutes.
Oh.
Minute approval. I have a series of minutes that I would like to take a vote on this evening for the returning members. New members, I'd ask you to vote, but abstain.
Thank you.
So I guess before I ask for a motion, is every returning member ready to vote on a series of minutes? And I'm going to state them now, and then I'd ask for a motion. 5/8/23, 2/5/2024, 2/26/24, 3/11/24, 3/13/24, 3/18/24, 3/20/24, 3/26/2024, and 3/27/2024. Karen, is that those the circulated and corrected?
That's correct. Just to also note that the last name of school committee member was corrected in the March 13th one from QUI to QIU, I don't know how to pronounce it. And there was an incorrect reference to the stretch code. A couple switched on the February 26 minutes to the specialized opt-in stretch code.
Yes.
So they're considered Scrivener's errors, but they have been corrected, and that's what will be posted.
Yes.
What was the first date you read?
The first date was May 8th, 2023.
So I was not there for that
Yes.
because that was 2 years ago.
Correct.
So I don't know if you want to divide it up,
Well,
votes, or,
I'm going to have to do that now.
yeah.
So there'll be, what I'm asking for is, as Julie indicated, 2 votes. There'll be 1 motion as to the 5/8/23 minutes, a vote, and then I would ask a member and a second on a second motion to include the 8 dates from 2/5 to 3/27/2024 for approval. Does that sound good for everybody? Okay.
I'm gonna highlight those, so I
Okay.
don't have the photographic memory, so I can't.
Okay, is there a motion for approval of the May 8th, 2023 Warrant Committee meeting minutes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, Julia has the motion, and Steve, you seconded the
I
motion.
second it, yes.
Okay. Karen, can we do a vote, please?
Yes, we can. So I'm going to call the names, and if you did not serve on the committee, you will abstain. Tom,
Yes.
Steve Rhines,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
Elizabeth Dillon,
I abstain. Thank you.
Jay Funley,
Yes.
Allison Gagnon, Allison,
It takes a minute to unmute when you're on your phone.
Sorry, it takes like forever to unmute. Yes.
thank you. Andrew,
Abstain.
we're down to Julia,
Abstain.
Brian McGuire,
Abstain.
Aman Agassi,
Abstain.
Judy,
Yes.
and motion carries.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, what I'd like to do at this point is highlight a second set of minutes from this current calendar year. The situation is the same, though. If you are a new member and was just appointed and sworn in by our moderator, I'd ask that you vote but abstain in that vote. So this again is for the new members. I'm going to renew the dates, and I'd ask for a motion in a second. That's February 5th, 2024, February 26th, 2024, March 11th, 2024, 3/13, 2024, 3/18, 2024, 3/20, 2024, 3/26, 2024, and 3/27, 2024. There's a total of 8 dates. Is there a motion?
Make a motion to approve minutes as detailed in your,
By the chair?
by the chair.
Okay, do I have a second to that motion?
Second.
Lori has seconded the motion. Karen, could we maybe please have a vote?
Sure. Tom,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Lori,
Yes.
Elizabeth,
I abstain.
Jay,
Yes.
Allison,
Yes.
Andrew,
Abstain.
Julia,
Yes.
Brian,
Abstain.
Aman,
Abstain with a side of fries.
Judy.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, especially our returning members, to looking at that. And just, this was not mentioned in future business, but there will be another round of minutes from this calendar year that is going to be sent out. There's been preliminary review on them. Karen does a great job. Sometimes it's just little stuff, but after you look at it enough, like, you just start to, as you know, see what you want to see. So I'd ask when you get that second set of emails, if you just please just take a look into the best of your memory. You'd be shocked at how much, as you know from reviewing the last set, how much you remember on specific nights. So thank you, and thank you, Karen, for dealing with me with the minutes. Okay. I don't think there's any other business. If there is no business, do we have a motion to adjourn? Andrew?
I would like to motion to adjourn the meeting.
Is there a second? Second. Okay, now, can we please take a roll vote as to the motion to adjourn?
Oh, we're not all just going to leave?
No, we have to do this, Jay. I'm going to be a better chair and follow the rules.
We all agreed.
Robert's Rules of Order.
I have to. And I'm working on them. I remind myself every time on the way here.
Okay, Tom?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Lori?
Yes.
Elizabeth?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Allison? Okay, Andrew?
Yes.
Julia?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Mom?
Yes.
Judy?
Yes.
Motion carries.
We are adjourned.
Happy Halloween,
Thank you,
guys.
everybody. Happy Halloween.
Happy